Bruins Beat is brought to you by Ice Picks and the Game Time app.
And welcome into Bruins Beat, presented by Prize Picks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $50 back when you play, just $5. And presented by Game Time. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off that first purchase. Terms apply. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. It's training camp week. Season's upon us. Prospects Challenge is in the rear view. And we are full steam ahead. And I want to get to Bruins training camp stuff in a bit. But first, there is some new information on Jeremy Swayman. Elliot Friedman did a written 32 thoughts. And I think it was like 0.5 and 6. So early. You know it's big when it's in like the first 10. Like it's like, all right, that's legit. I wonder like when he does 32 thoughts, there have to be times when like 20 through 32, it's like, what the hell am I writing this week? Like
that's usually like my favorite part of those ones though, because it's like you get to like 28 and he's like, I saw a cover band that did Rush songs. What a great time! It's like something random like that I always enjoy at the end of those 32 thoughts. So that I feel like that's like the odds and ends, the nice little tidbits that usually have nothing. I feel like if your team is getting in those spots on 32 thoughts, it means like you're not really having any drama. You're not having any contract talks, anything like that. If you're like 1 through like 5, 1 through 10, some stuff you have developments that are worth Elliot focusing in on. Don't really necessarily always want that to be the case. Maybe like the start of free agency, where he'll like, I think he always drops one like a day before the start of free agency. Like, here's where I think everyone's gonna go. And I think he did this one, and it was like, yeah, I think Lindholm and Zadorov are like locked in. I'm going to Boston. I was like, oh, okay.
It's happening. I agree. And I just imagine though, like writing that every week, those final couple slots, he's like, all right, what am I thinking for this? But ironically, as you said, they are his best thoughts. And it is a perfect name for it, 32 thoughts, because a lot of them are just thoughts. There's obviously news sprinkled in. But I always enjoy it. But so he did have some stuff on Swayman, mentioned that things are quiet as they work out the physiological. What did he say? I think it was physiological differences or philosophical differences.
Not I was going to say, yeah.
Physiological differences. Philosophical differences, excuse me.
Yes.
And then also said that he mentioned that this is a good example of why you don't want to take your star player to
arbitration.
Arbitration. My brain is not working today. Clearly, working to arbitration.
For the record,
the Bruins. For the record, Swayman took the Bruins to arbitration. But then he also mentioned that Swayman still wants to sign long term. So nothing really crazy with this. But I think hearing that things are quiet is not the best thing with training camp about to start.
Yeah, it's not ideal. Again, you get to this point of the year, and a lot can happen between now and. Wednesday is when I think camp officially starts. I think it's going to be a lot of off-ice testing, stuff like that. We'll probably hear from Montgomery and Sweeney that day, so we might be able to get at least some more clarity, hopefully, of where talks stand and what they're expecting before practices and skates really start ramping up on Thursday. That being said, you're still hitting a point here where getting to crunch time, right? And if there is radio silence and it's waiting for one group or the other to budge, things can get interesting, right? This is a kind of a tough contract to map out where I think we've talked about this the entire summer where we're looking at, like just 8x8, easy, let's get it done. But when you look at from both sides, right, Swayman who, want to, set the new floor, I think, for upcoming goalies, and that's something that matters to him, a guy that I think wants to, get paid after the performance he had in the playoffs, while also probably banking on future performance as well, which is always kind of a risky thing in terms of a player asking for that versus what they're actually going to get. And then from the Bruins perspective, right, you've got a team that has like a 25-year-old potential number one. There's a lot of reason why you want to sign this guy long-term, but there are question marks about this is a guy who's only played 44 total games in a season. That's his highest workload. Like, I think it's easy just to, paint it with a broad brush and mention that, you want this just to be 8-8 and be done with it. But I'm sure the Bruins, there has to be some hesitancy. You have to look ahead at the market and what you're able to sign. And not to say that I think they're like, I don't think we can afford this guy, but I think it's more of keeping cap flexibility for years ahead, right? You don't want to commit 8.5, 9.5 million to a guy that you're still not 100% sure on, right? And I think there's probably Bruins fans who'll push back and be like, listen, he's your best option. You saw what he did in the playoffs. Maybe this is just the start, which would be a great scenario to happen. But again, like goalies are kind of a volatile kind of asset in terms of it's very rare you have guys that consistently replicate it year in and year out. I'm not saying that Swayman can't do that. Everything we've seen from him shows a guy that's hyper-focused, that has a commitment to getting better, is very confident in his abilities. And I think it's probably a worthwhile investment, but what does worthwhile investment mean, right? For the Bruins, is that 8x8? Is it, hey, we'll give you 7, which is probably more than we want to pay, but it's 4 or 5 years and, we see how it is. Like, again, I think I've mentioned this time and time again, but whenever that fucking contract, whenever this is over,
that fucking contract is over.
Whenever we're ready to move on from this, and I'm sure all parties, both Jeremy Swayman's camp and the Bruins, are happy to have this done with. I have no idea what it's going to look like, because you could map out 10 different scenarios. It's like Doctor Strange and all the different variants. Like, I have no idea what the actual one is going to be. It's all going to come down to, I think, what side kind of wins out. And as is usually the case when it comes to these prolonged negotiations, when do both sides, settle and find kind of the common ground? Maybe both sides don't like it, right? Maybe it's you get it done, but Swayman wanted more term. He wanted more of a payout. The Bruins probably want to sign him long term, but probably not at whatever they're probably paying in terms of the annual value. It all comes down to what are both sides willing to concede and what are both sides willing to finally settle on to get this freaking contract done. Because I think everyone's ready to move on. I don't know about you, Evan. I'm ready to stop talking about Jeremy Swayman. Let me tell you. I'm ready to talk about Jeremy Swayman stopping pucks in October through hopefully June. I'm done talking about the contract. I'm done.
I'm with you. I'm
sick
with
of
you,
it.
because this was the storyline throughout the summer, and I think everybody wants this in the rear view. I wonder, like, when camp starts and he's like the SpongeBob meme, kind of looking at his friends having fun and him not. I wonder if that is like, all right, we need to get something done. I can't keep doing this. I do find it interesting that he says, or reportedly still wants to sign long term. If he's asking for what he's reportedly asking for, which is a lot of money, the McAvoy deal was thrown out there, and the Bruins have reportedly offered 4 times 6.25. Is Swayman going to get a long-term deal that's worth, is that money going to be 7.5 for 7-8 years? Like, that's where I wonder, like, if he still wants to sign long-term, what's that money going to look like? Because obviously you're going to have to, the Bruins are going to have to give a little bit more than they're probably willing to, just because it's long-term. But it also probably, let's face it, isn't going to be what Swayman is worth. It's going to be less than what Swayman's worth if everything goes right in 4 to 5 years. So, like, if they weren't fine with that through the summer months, and they aren't fine with that now, is Swayman and the Bruins going to be fine with that like a week from now, 2 weeks from now? I mean, as they negotiate heavier, maybe. But I just wonder if Swayman wants to sign long term, is he okay with getting probably a little bit less than he wanted? I mean, that is the art of negotiation. I don't know if they're there yet.
Yeah, I mean, again, it all comes down to what are you willing to concede in that spot, right? Because if, what is long term? Are we talking 7 or 8 years, which I could see from Swayman's
That's
camp?
What I would think it is.
Right. But if we're talking from, Swayman's camp, right, if you're going to lock yourself in that long and you want to stay here, you're operating with the assumption that you're going to probably get paid more up front right now because you're expecting the cap to jump out. Like, that's not Swayman trying to, jump ahead of the market or being greedy or anything like that. That's reading how the market is going, right? And this is a business, and you look at how much probably guys that are a tier below him are going to make by the end of his contract. I mentioned, I think, on Poke the Bear with Ty Anderson, like, in a couple of years, a guy that's like a steady 20 goal scorer is going to be making like $9.5 million a year. A couple of years from now, like, the market's going to get really weird in a couple of years. So
yeah,
if Swayman is committed to a long-term deal, I could see like the concession or the ask from the Bruins is, all right, you have to pay a little bit ahead of time now so that he falls within market value, knowing full well that if he's lives up to his potential, right? If he's a top 5 goalie and he's got a Vezina 2 on his resume and he wins a cup or something over an 8-year deal, by the end of it, and he's 33, 34, and he's still making 9.5, it's probably 5, 6, 7, 8 goalies probably making at least that, if not more, right? Like hell, what's Shesterkin going to sign for in a couple of years, right? So I think I could see from Swayman's camp that even if he wants to sign long term, you have to ask for a higher annual payout as a result. Are the Bruins ready to kind of meet that, though, right? There is a risk, I think, from their perspective in terms of, giving 9.5, 8.5 even for a guy that, again, has only played 44 games. Highest Vezina finish was 7th overall. And again, like, it's a lot to like about a guy that's 25 years old who's gotten better and better every year coming off this playoff run. And again, the Bruins could look really, really dumb if they sign him to a bridge deal where he hits free agency in a couple of years and he goes out and has a 924 save percentage and he's lights out in the playoffs and this team goes to the conference finals or later. And all of a sudden you're like, well, this is great. This guy is a legit. Shit, we didn't sign him. But there's pros and cons to however we want to map it out. Just because as promising as, Swayman is, and that's not to say that he's like this prospect or something like that, right? But his ceiling is still kind of, you haven't mapped it out yet. It still remains to be seen. It just makes it such a tough negotiation in terms of what the final term and the final payout is going to be.
Well, he is 25, so long term might feel like 2, 3, 4 years. So
right, yeah,
maybe that's what it means. Anyways, I want to get into storylines in camp, things like that. But first, quick word from our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on Prize Picks because it's gone when September ends. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money, even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, your picks are still live. Big questions going into the football season. Will Patrick Mahomes throw for more or less than 267.5 yards one week? Will Jalen Hurts throw for 240.5 passing yards another? Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus because it's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Now, back to the show. Before we get into training camp stuff, big news item actually came out, I think it was Friday. Ryan Johnston, next radio voice of the Bruins. Easy pick, great pick, the right pick. Chad Finn did a story on him over the weekend. I saw Ryan Johnston talking on Toucher and Rich, Fred Toucher mentioning just how far Ryan Johnston's had to go for this job and for his dream. And it's really inspiring. It is a great story. And just, they picked the right guy. I don't think there's any debate about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is a guy that, Ryan has kind of seen it all. He's got so much experience calling games with like the Lowell Lock Monsters way back when.
Yep.
A guy that has paid his dues time and time again and has kind of been gearing up for this role. I know he's mentioned that it's, the job of a lifetime, something that he's long, sought after and wanted to do. And it's good in this industry when you have people who do the job the right way, are are gracious, are passionate about their craft, want to keep getting better, and aspire for these kind of higher goals to finally reach it. It's always great to see. It's always great to see someone like Ryan, who has done such a great job for so long, get to this point to call games. So very excited, well deserved, obviously, for Ryan, and can't wait to hear him on the radio moving forward this year and the years beyond.
Yeah, great hire, fun hire, and I'm really happy for Ryan because again, like I don't know if people realize the play-by-play route is a crazy one.
Yes.
It takes years in the minor leagues. It is rare for someone to do 3-4 years in the minors or college and then immediately go pro. But it for 98% of people, it is a long road. And it's a brutal road that a lot of people just say, you know what, I'd rather a stable life with a consistent paycheck and I'd rather that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But Ryan has stuck it out and gotten his dream job. So I think it's an amazing thing. Biggest storylines in camp. Swayman obviously is number one. We've discussed Swayman. I'm not going to dive too deep. I will say, though, one storyline like branch off of that is, how long is he out of camp, and does that impact him starting the season? Not to say he's not going to be there on night one. That would be a massive story if he's not there for game one. But more so, does it, is he little less ready for the start of the season? He's been training all off season. He was at captain's practices. So that is all, he's been training and everything. But I just wonder if, I think the only storyline with that is he missing out on time during camp, and does that hurt him when the season starts? But we've discussed that a number of times, so I don't feel the need to continue to hash that one out.
I'm done talking about this, Evan.
I want to be too. Every time I look at the Bruins Ringside YouTube channel, every title has Swayman somewhere in the title.
But all of a sudden, though, Evan, we talk about golfing and having transfusions, and all the comments are like, "Skip ahead to 8 minutes to turn this shit off."
Was that? I didn't look at the. I didn't look.
God forbid, over the course of this offseason, where we've had not that much to talk about, guys. God forbid, a couple of boys talking about golfing and lovely transfusions. God forbid, everyone.
What episode was that? I forget. Was that last week?
It was a very memorable episode talking about how we both suck at golf.
That's amazing. They I'm not surprised that they were pissed about that. Was it the Bruins rookies to keep an eye on? Must
Probably.
have been that. Yeah.
Or the one where we don't have Swayman's face on it, but
yeah, it's the one without Swayman.
Sorry. We'll keep on talking about Jeremy Swayman over and over again.
Yeah, well,
Tune in next
You're
time.
gonna lose your number one goalie.
Yes.
He's gonna be playing for the Montreal Canadiens before you know it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'd do a whole podcast on transfusions. I'll do it just to piss people off.
Mm-hmm.
This, to me, the second biggest storyline is actually Jim Montgomery's future. I know, like, second line right wing we'll get into in a bit, but what happens with Montgomery this season, I think, is interesting. Now, I know this Wednesday, as you said, Sweeney and Montgomery usually speak on the first day, and I would assume that it continues in that light this year. But again, going into the final year of the 3-year contract he signed back in 2022, we have not heard any word yet on an extension. So I do wonder if and when we hear about this, if there is one.
It's definitely something where you don't want a lame duck coach going into, especially this team with the expectations on them, the excitement of, the guys they've added in the off season. It's not a good spot to put your coach in. And again, like, it raises a bigger question if the Bruins are kind of like with Swayman, hesitant about handing him a contract because they don't know what exactly they're getting. But again, for a coach, right, like, it's not the ideal spot to be in. I'm sure people can be like, oh, like, this guy, ramp the pressure up, have him playing for his job. But what happens when you get to the final days of training camp? And probably the right thing to do is to give a guy like Lysell a look and have him roll with the punches, knowing that it's not always going to be pretty, right? There's going to be times he messes up. Same with a guy like Merkulov, maybe a guy like Patra, who, depending on what he does during the preseason, maybe, he could start the year in the NHL, or maybe they want to push him down to Providence. But if you're Montgomery and you're coaching for your job and you want the results immediately, do you go with a guy like Lysell, or maybe you feel better and a little safer with a guy like Tyler Johnson? And that's not to say that if Tyler Johnson isn't if he's lighting it up in the preseason, then yeah, I think he's earned a spot, right? But in terms of the long-term future of this team, right, I think you need a coach that's willing to work with some of these younger players, right? And this is what we talk about with why guys like Lysell are so important. Yes, you want the quick fix in the top 6 role. You want a guy that could give you 20 goals, but you need young, affordable talent that can really supplement what you have, which is a pretty strong foundation right now. And it just feels like that the patience required for that can kind of get lost on any coach. Doesn't matter if they're, one that's really tough on the players, one that's known for developing players. When you've got a year left on your deal and you're trying to play for your future and coach for your job, you want the immediate results. Doesn't matter what happens 3 years down the road if you're on a 1-year deal. So finding out whatever that clarity is moving forward with Montgomery's contract is going to be huge in terms of setting, I think, kind of the tone for the year. I think the tone, the expectations are what they are. I don't expect those to change, barring injury or what have you. But from the guy who's running the ship in Montgomery, where his standing is and what his future is, it's going to be key in terms of what his choices are as he tries to put this team right now in the best position to succeed later on this year.
Yeah, I mean, you need sort of that rope, as you alluded to have guys make mistakes and not immediately be out of the lineup. You see it with any team. If there's a coach who's really hard on guys and benches players immediately for making one mistake, they're going to play rigid. They're going to do safe things. And, a safe thing would be putting Frederick on that second line or Tyler Johnson. And there's nothing wrong with that because, as you said, if those guys are kicking ass up there, then, yeah, leave them. Oh, my God. Do not take them off that. But the better move long-term, both if it works and if it doesn't, is Fabian Lysell. Because if it doesn't work over the course of, 30 games, 35 games, well, okay, you know what you don't have. And you know what you do have in him. Whereas if it does work and there is that, that seed planted of, oh, this is a legit top 6 player in the NHL, then you know it. And that's going to bear fruits, not just this year, but years down the road. So I agree with you. I think they need to figure something out. Now, again, if they don't want to re-sign him, they're just going to fire him. I doubt it. That would have been done in the offseason. So I don't think that's going to be it. So that's my thing. And we've talked about it before of the one thing left on Montgomery's Bruins resume that is just glaring is the playoff success. That's sort of his one thing that people look towards and go, okay, that's not good enough. And I think that 23 season hangs over him like a gray cloud in terms of just, a horrible experience. So I don't know. I mean, are they going to hand him a contract extension in May when they make the conference final? Are they going to do it in November when the team is, looking really good? Are they going to do it at the deadline? That's my thing. And I think, you get a better coach if you say, hey, we're going to give you a 2 or 3 year extension, whatever it is. And, win in that time period, but we're going to give you time. I think it also just, and we've talked about this before too, it goes to show just the volatility of NHL head coaches and why I've always said it. I would way rather be a college head coach than a really good college head coach than a really good NHL head coach, because even really good NHL head coaches don't last a long time in one spot. And that's the thing. And Bruce Cassidy was great with the Bruins, lasted 5 years. That's not a very long time. It's relatively a long time compared to other NHL head coaches. So, this is a fascinating one.
Isn't Marty St. Louis one of the longest tenured coaches, and he's been there for 2 years now? I know Jared Bednar's there probably the longest, or Cooper. Those two are far and away. But isn't St. Louis 7th or 8th longest tenure?
Yeah.
It happened a year and a half ago.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. There's so much pressure to win immediately, and there's so much. And you even look at St. Louis, if those prospects start to have trouble developing, or when they're supposed to make that next jump into being a wild card team, if they don't, he's gone. And that's sort of the thing. And I think across all professional sports, it's a problem. And I think it's why I think it's good to hold on to your coaches, let them develop. Now, if the room tunes them out, then that's a whole nother thing. Sort of like we saw with Bruce Cassidy. But with Montgomery, you've given him 2 years. This is year 3. I mean, I don't know. I don't know when the right time is. I think the safe bet is just hand him the extension and, see what he gives you over the next year or two, because, it comes down to who else is out there. That's really what it comes down to, I think, mostly. I want to get to more second line right wing stuff. Patra and Merkulov. And then there's another one, I think, that we've talked about a little bit, but I think we can talk about some more. But first, quick word from our friends over at Game Time. Fall is beginning, which means football is back. Nothing beats a college football atmosphere. And with both college and NFL games, who doesn't love a good tailgate? Get to the game with Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. This fall, my friends and I are going to the Patriots-Titans game in Tennessee. And how will we get tickets for the game? Game Time, of course. The super deal has been amazing to us in the past, and there's no doubt it will be great to us again. I just love the curated deals, which make it easier to find the best price on great seats. Some other features I love are the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. All-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. So, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Now, back to the show. So we did talk a little second line right wing when we were talking about Montgomery, because I do think that those impact each other quite a bit. There hasn't really been anything new talked about quite yet with that second line. I mean, you had Marchand's comments, you had Montgomery's comments at the golf tournament. We really won't get a good view of who's on that second line or who's getting looks there until on ice stuff starts at training camp. Again, I still hold that I think Lysel's probably, I want to see Lysel get the shot there to see what you have. But, Frederick's in a contract year. Tyler Johnson's on a PTO. He's shown a history of being in top sixes. So, I do think there are some other options as well.
Yeah, no, it's going to be fascinating for such a key part of the lineup. And again, I think all the focus probably is on Lysel and what he can provide there. The skill is there. He's a different kind of prospect from other guys we've seen get called up in terms of just that high-end ability, the ability to, dangle the puck through a couple of skaters. If he hits, right, and he becomes a guy that looks like a everyday top six player, I think that's probably some of the appeal is that you want that to be the case. You want this guy who has 20 goal potential, has, that highlight reel capabilities in that spot, and to have him thrive. Everyone wants that. Everyone wants their prospect that's been kind of marinating for a couple of years to make that big step forward. I think the Bruins are going to give him every opportunity to do that. But as you said, whether it's from Montgomery and what he thinks is best for that line, whether it's how the Bruins want to, shape that line, right, where it's Coyle and Marchand, you can make the case that, maybe it's Lysel's more on like a third line with other younger players like a Patra or like a Geeky or someone like that, maybe like one NHL or established guy with those guys because, Coyle, Marchand, and Frederick, that has all the makings of like a shutdown line if that's what you want as well. So, again, a lot of it comes down to the players themselves, right? If Lysel runs away with the job and is dynamic in the preseason and looks like an everyday NHLer, he's probably going to get the spot. But if he can't kind of hold his end of the bargain during this kind of make-or-break camp, then it falls on the Bruins to kind of change their approach, I think. I think Lysel should be the guy that they want in that spot, but they're also not just going to hand it to him. This is what the Bruins do every camp in terms of not setting anything in stone for some of these younger players and having you earn it. And whether it's Frederick, Geeky, Tyler Johnson, someone like that, they do have options. It just, in terms of fit, potential, cost, especially with that rookie contract, Lysel would be the best case scenario, I think, from the Bruins, but it's nowhere near set in stone.
No, not even close. And that's the thing. I think that the onus is completely on him. And he has to, like, and I also wonder, like, if Frederick sort of steals the job, or Tyler Johnson or Morgan Geekie, like, what are the chances Frederick can shimmy back in? Like you mentioned, the third line. Um, if that third line center spot is between, potentially Patra or Georgi Merkulov, like, are they going to feel comfortable putting Lysell on the right side of that? That's the other end of it too, where it's like, is the spot for him on the third line? I don't know. I think I would rather Lysell be with veteran NHL players. The question is, do veteran NHL players want someone like Lysell on that line with them? That's the other end of it. So I think that's the most fascinating on ice thing that they have going. That's their big hole right now. Everywhere else, I mean, the top lines seems pretty set to start at least. And the third and fourth line, we know who those guys are. It just kind of comes down to how they're going to fit in. Second line's the one area where you do look at and say, wonder who's going to be on that right side. I mentioned there just a little bit that third line, and I think this is where another big storyline comes in. Matt Patra and Georgi Merkulov. I don't know if there's room for both on this roster right now. Fourth line seems to have a certain identity. I don't foresee them being on the second line. I don't think you're putting like Merkulov on the second line, like right wing spot. So I wonder how they both look in training camp and who gets the edge. I mean, we've said it before, Merkulov's played a lot more professional hockey over the last couple of years than Matt Patra has. Matt Patra's coming off shoulder surgery. So I think people might not realize, like, Merkulov might actually have the inside edge to that, just off experience. But we've seen what Matt Patra can do at the NHL level, and I think that's what people remember most. And I think that's what makes it such an interesting clash for camp.
Yeah, and again, like you mentioned, people have already done like their lineup projections, and there's been a couple that have Patra starting the year in Providence or just not in the lineup. And people are like, what are you talking about? This guy was, surprised everyone last year, had a lot of promise. Yeah, but also the Bruins didn't have the option of sending him to Providence, right? Like, that is the one thing when he's a younger player who's still 20 years old, who's, coming off of major shoulder surgery. Again, send him to Lysell. If he plays at a high level in the preseason, that answers that, right? Like, you don't have to worry about it. And then he'll probably be your third line center if that's the case. And if Merkulov can't play at a high level, but if he looks, like he needs more time to develop out of the gate, which is not out of the realm of reason, right? In terms of just the injury, his age, there's nothing wrong with sending him down to Providence, Matt Patra, to get him rolling there, have him play top line minutes, power play minutes, and have him kind of get into a groove and feeling confident. Like, I'd rather him, if you don't think he's quite ready, go down there and play 10 games and have 7 points, feeling good, and then maybe he's back up here a little bit later on. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. But also, like, it falls on both him and Merkulov to prove what they have. Same, like Merkulov, we learned absolutely nothing about, him last year.
Not a thing.
His 3-4 games playing 8 minutes a night in the fourth line. Not exactly where his kind of skill set is best utilized. So I want to see him in a couple of these preseason games with NHL talent, right? Like, there's guys who are going to be on this camp roster who are probably just set to go down to Providence, or they're veterans that will have a lot of value down in the AHL level. I want to see Merkulov play with a Geekie or, a guy like that and see if he can build some chemistry and what Merkulov can do in that role. So those two guys are obviously really a lot of intrigue there, but it's kind of the same with how, like, the second line wing spot is. The Bruins do have options. Like, if they don't like either of those guys, they're not pulling their weight, you can put Tyler Johnson, who's a natural centerman, in that spot as well. Don't forget that last year, who was the Bruins' top line center at the very end of the Panthers series was Morgan Geekie. Like, They can put Morgan Geekie in that role just as well too, if they don't think either of those guys are ready. So again, like, if you're the Bruins and you're leaning into this young talent and, like, hoping, banking on ceiling, there's a lot to like about Lysell, second line spot, and like a guy like Patra or Merkulov on the third line, where they can develop and have some of that higher ceiling. But if they're not able to showcase that, the Bruins do have options, and I don't see it like, all right, if Lysell and Merkulov are good in the preseason, I think the Bruins are going to give them a shot, but it's not a whole lot of rope, right, in terms of where these guys are, especially if Jim Montgomery is coaching for his job. Like, that patience that sometimes is required may not necessarily be there if this is still going to be stuck on a 1-year deal.
I wonder if this roster is big enough to even house two of those guys.
Yeah.
Like, are they, because you do, again, on that third line, you've got Brazeau, you've got Geeky, you've got Frederick, you've got Tyler Johnson. The second line, you got potentially Frederick, Geeky, Tyler Johnson. Like, they have high expectations this year. We've talked about this before. They're Stanley Cup contenders. They should be competing for the cup. I mean, the conference final should be the goal at the very least. Can you afford to, have some mistakes made from the third line center? Can you, at the same time as mistakes made by the second line right winger, combined with the regular mistakes that happen in any NHL hockey game? We're not saying veterans don't make mistakes. So I just wonder if they're going to be open to having two spots in the lineup devoted to guys that they're looking to develop down the road. This isn't, 2017-18 where it's like, hey, we're kind of, at the end of a retool, we'll see what we got, and then they end up being really good. Like, they're still, they just spent, a lot on a number one center. They just spent a lot on a big top four defenseman. So I do wonder if, we wonder like Patra versus Merkulov, is it just one of Patra, Merkulov, and Lysell that make it? Is it two? So I think that's going to be another storyline to watch. And then at the end, like, I think Brad Marchand's health is interesting. We still don't know if he's going to start training camp. He says he's likely not going to, miss any actual games or miss any regular season games. And as we know, Marchand is bullish and, always headstrong and wanting to come back for sure. I just wonder about his health throughout camp and the season because, again, you need Marchand at 100%. And I think that's going to be quite the thing throughout the year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is a guy that has built a potential Hall of Fame career off of proving people wrong, but also Father Time is undefeated, even for the guys that are the most dogged in terms of extending their careers. And again, we've talked about this before, I don't expect him to all of a sudden plummet and be a 20-goal, 21-assist guy over 82 games or something like that. But I think you saw last year where he had that kind of extended kind of cold stretch where he wasn't producing. I think if you're a Bruins fan, you can't expect him to be the point-per-game guy he was in the past. Still can be a very good player. Still is kind of your on-ice spark plug that gets the emotion, can change the momentum of a game with a hit or can do those things. But, yeah, like where his trajectory is worth monitoring, right? Is he more of a 60-point, still very good, excellent two-way top six player on the wing? Is that what you're still getting from him? I think that's going to be worth monitoring, knowing full well that, again, you've got younger talent around him now that are supplementing some of that expected decline, but that is definitely something that you have to keep tabs on. That one of these guys that's been kind of your go-to players, you have to kind of ease, I think, maybe some of those expectations off him just a little bit moving forward.
100%. And I think that's, wow. Nice voice crack from me, geez. Yeah, I agree with you on Marchand. And again, I think it's something to monitor as camp goes along. Those are sort of the big storylines. I don't think we missed anything major. Things will obviously pop up. Tyler Johnson is definitely one as a PTO. What does Korpisalo look like? Korpisalo versus Bussy, I think are all legitimate. But those are sort of the five, I think, that are big ticket items. On defense, as we've said before, the six seem pretty set in stone. Your seventh seems pretty set in stone. So, yeah, I think that those are sort of the big things to watch in training camp, barring, of course, any unforeseen circumstances, which hopefully there are not many of, or any of, for that matter. Connor, what can the people look forward to from you over Boston Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, well, I've covered every step of the way, starting with training camp and the preseason. It's finally here, Evan. Thank God. So whether that is a Swayman contract, hopefully, lineup battles, roster projections, preseason takeaways, all that good stuff. You can find all of it over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe, so you can read my stuff over there. If you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever the hell it's called, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That has been Bruins Beat. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.